All right, everyone. Welcome back to lunch. I hope you've enjoyed working with React Router. That was a joke, kind of funny. Although, did you? I know it's a lot to take in. You have just learned React, and React Router is a library that sits on top of React and uses features of it that you have not even learned yet. You're wondering like how all of these magical like components work. Like how does route know what the router is seeing, or how does like a nav link know where you are, or like what your current URL is? The answer is that there's like a secret side channel in React called the context that can get passed down from parents to children through intermediate children without them knowing about it, like some kind of genetic disorder. And that lets you implement APIs like React Router. It's discouraged for most general use. Usually when we're passing down information, we want it to flow through props. But in certain cases, like you're building a generalized routing framework, it makes sense to have this like back channel. Okay, that's it. You've probably not gotten to watch all of the video. I should have sent that out like before lunch. Sorry about that. But how do you have questions either from the video or just from the workshop in general?
I thought like it was really easy to follow up.
Oh, cool.
It was very clear.
Cool, cool.
Like,
Oh, great.
okay, I have a question. I would really like some clarification on the this.match.params or this.props.match.params, etc.
This.props.match.params. So like in, where's a place where we use that?
Single artist.
Okay. So in single artist,
It could be elsewhere as well.
yeah, so we've got like, yeah, we use it in a few places. This.props.match.params.artist.id. So what is the nature of the medical emergency? Like what clarification do you like? Where does this come from? What's going on? Yeah, so this comes from the same place that all other props for a component come from, and that is the component in which they are mounted. So if we look at the React dev tools and we find, let's look at a single artist. Shouldn't one of these start selected? Okay. So I'm going to drill down. If you don't have the React dev tools, because I didn't show up and be like, you should install the React dev tools, you should install the React dev tools. They are like super useful in terms of getting visibility into your React app, especially when it's like not rendering anything. Okay, so inside of our main area, we've got this switch, and then this route, okay, that's much code. So this route is the thing in, what is it, main, I think, that says, okay, when you go to artists, artist ID, render the single artist component. And now the single artist component is mounted under it. So it's the route that's passing in these props. And the props that single artist is getting are history, location, and state. Or sorry, history, location, and match. And that's happening because single artist is being mounted directly under our router component, specifically under the route component. So when, I think later in the workshop, it has you make like little anonymous components that receive router params and then pass them in differently to the child component. This is a thing it has to do, right? Yes. Somewhere. Maybe in single artist, actually. Yeah, so I think here we are pulling out, let's see. Yeah, so here we have a route, and the component that we're rendering is not directly all albums. It is this, oh, I guess we aren't using the router params. It is this, this anonymous component under all albums, which will itself be receiving router params that we could use, but are not. I guess because we don't need it. We think we already have the albums. Did that answer your question? The short answer is they come from the router.
Yeah.
Kind of.
I think we need to just like go back and reread the sectional history location or whatever it is.
Yeah, it's the things you get are, yeah, history, which has various methods on it that you can call to manipulate the history. Location, which has the current location, and then match, which has whatever was extracted from the URL bar.
That is accessible to props.
This is accessible to the component. Yeah, it's accessible through props, and you can access it from the component that's mounted under the router. They're no different from other props. They just are passed in by the router. Yeah.
I would like to know when you actually compare props to the constructor and the super.
Yeah, like why isn't it happening here?
Yeah, I saw it done one time, but I still didn't understand why it was being passed in. And I'm not sure it was on here, but it was in the main function. But I just don't understand like why you would need to include props in the constructor.
So you need them, yeah, why? I'm actually like, why are we getting, actually, are we getting props? Yeah, so it's set up at some point before it's mounted. I think the real answer is like, if you want to access them in the constructor, you need to call them here. Let's find out. Props. So I think this is going to be undefined. Whereas if we pass in props here, it will not be undefined. Yeah. And I actually honestly think I think you should basically always do this, personally. Because there are actually other arguments passed into the constructor, and it's just better to pass those through, I think, to the superclass constructor. You don't even know what they are. How could you be dealing with them appropriately? I think it happens to be the case that React components, like the component superclass before, or the reconciler maybe, before component did mount is called, ensures that this.props is set correctly. But no need to make it do that.
I got stuck for a while on like bringing out like one thing out here.
Mm-hmm.
All.
Oh yeah.
I'm wondering if you could like quickly go through what it would be like to use more updated all.
Yeah, so rather than Bluebird map. Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's a bit retro, isn't it? Okay, so let's say, okay, we've got the artist ID, we've got the path, and we want to get albums and songs. I kind of actually have to wonder why we are doing this. Wouldn't it make sense? Wouldn't it make sense to do it in all albums and songs? Right? So that's one answer, is like, and actually that is something to think about. If you find yourself making multiple AJAX requests in your component did mount, especially for a situation like this, you might be better served just having the subcomponents load that data. Because for one thing, if I never click on albums, why did I go and make that request and wait for it and do all that? There's no real reason, right?
So in general, like you call actors more than once, it's a sign that I should move forward and
Probably. It's a sign that you could be leveraging your component hierarchy more, or if you really are doing some request that is that complex, like maybe you have like a view of all open pull requests in repositories that you follow on GitHub, which requires that you make 2 API calls. So say you have to find all repositories you're following and then find all open pull requests. In that case, I would say that function should live somewhere not in your component's did mount. It should live in like a GitHub access or GitHub library file, and then you should just call that from here. Okay, so that's how I might refactor it, but how, given that this is what we're doing, how would I do this? Good question. So you could do, okay, so here are the 3 paths. That seems fine. If I do, yeah, it's actually pretty similar. So paths.map to axios.get. Promise.all of those will get me the promise of an array of them. So I can do artist, albums, songs. Notice that I'm, I'm destructuring out the first three things from this array because promise.all is going to return the promise of an array. What am I doing? Oh yeah, I'm saying map this axios.get, and then I want the data out of it, right? So I'm going to get the responses and say responses.map to, for each response, get its data. So now this will be the promise of the response data for each of these paths. And then this will be, in here we'll have the same artist, album, songs, and I can just do this dot set state. And I broke it. Totally broke it. Anyone know what I did wrong? Me either. Let's do that. Oh, like this? With square brackets? Okay, so I've got, this is like super correct, right? This is artists, this is albums, and this is songs. So what is, oh, it's nested, I see. So it's like set state to be artist is albums, songs, and then, wait, it's artist and then albums and songs. That's, sure. Oh yeah, what the dot 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 is. This is, let's see. This is an object spread, which basically says copy all of the key value pairs from this object into this object. So if we have, I don't know if I can do it in here. Oh yeah, great. So x has one key, foo, which is equal to 2. If I say y is all of the keys from x and bar is equal to 4, I get this. It's a lot like the array spread operator, where if I say x is 1, 2, 3, and y equals dot, 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 x, and then a, I'm going to get all of it concatenated together. So what this was doing is it was doing it a little more explicitly. It was saying artist.albums is these albums, artist.songs is these songs, set that on state.
If you had your state like split up into artist, and songs, could you just grab each one and set them in sets?
Oh yeah, if you have your states set up differently, which I think really we should. It's really unclear why. Yeah, I would probably not lump them in like this. I would probably separate it out, and if you did that, and then change this to be then this will probably look. Yeah. Another way you could do this is with async await. And this might even look the nicest, I think. It would be something like this dot set state, artist, await axios.get main path, albums, await axios.get that, songs, same deal. And then I'm just going to return here so we don't do all this nonsense twice. No. Albums.map. Oh, sorry, this has to be... we need to get the data off of these, so I might just... So this, I think, looks the nicest. This is how you do it with a promise chain. And this function, you wouldn't want it to live here. You would want it to be like a utility function somewhere. But okay, other questions? All right, if there's nothing more on React Router, we can take a look at forms. Are we pleased with Router? You're going to get a lot more experience with it, basically, for the next like 6. Okay, so let's take a look at how we do forms in React. So I think we do not currently have any at all in Juke. They're not so different, but the fact that React has this notion of single-way data flow, as data starts at the top of the tree and like always flows towards its leaves, makes dealing with form input a little bit tricky, because that necessarily is data that needs to flow up somehow. And so the general approach we take is the same as, it's the same approach we take every time in JavaScript when we want data to flow back to us, and that is we pass in a function that later can get called. So let's take a look at that, and let us actually come back to our friend Emojilicious. Which we will now start. Okay, so to sort of refamiliarize ourselves with this code base, it is not as complex an app as Juke is. We have this is our main.js, we have a browser router rather than hash router. We could use hash router. I think browser router is just a little bit nicer. And we basically have two paths. We can either look at this page, which shows us all the emoji, or we can go to the page for a single emoji, which is the one emoji component. And what I'd like to do is add comments to the one emoji page. So we're going to let you type in a username and type a comment, and it'll add that comment to this emoji on the back end, which I think we've already set up the models for it. So I think we have a comment class, and comments belong to a user, and there's one last part that's important. And in our API, we can post to emoji/name comments, and it'll go and grab, let's see, name and text from the body, and create the user if need be, and then create a comment. Cool. So our backend, I think, works. I guess we can test that by being like, are there any comments on this emoji? Oh, sorry. Should be API emoji laughing comments. And that's what we would expect. There are no comments because we have not added comments yet. Okay, so let's do a couple of things. Thing one, I think we don't need this really bad I'm just always here. It was a nice demonstration. Its time has come. Thing two, and you have to forgive me for this, these underlines are driving me crazy. So, so we're gonna stop that. Oh, thank God. It looks so much nicer. It looks so bad. Okay, anyway. And now we're gonna look at the one emoji page and talk about adding form fields to it. So in the simplest case, you can add form fields just like you add them in HTML. They just go in as tags. So to be all proper with HTML, I should wrap my form fields in a form, and I can have input name equals let's call it name, I guess. Maybe that's confusing. Let's do username. And then a text area name equals text. And those are pretty badly laid out, but there they are on the page. I can type into them, and I can't submit anything because I don't have a submit button, so I should probably have input type is submit. And also the styling on this form is just absolutely killing me. I have no idea why any of these things look as bad as they do. So let's fix that. Comment form. In our style CSS, we can say comment form input and these are all inputs. Should be display block. Okay, that's better. Oh, and I guess they should all have the same width. So width 50%. Okay, that's, I'll take it. That's better for sure. Okay, and so when I say, like, Ashi says this is one of my favorites, and I submit this, nothing happens, except, do you notice what happened? Sorry? Yeah, so it cleared everything. It reloaded the page, because that's what happens by default when you submit a form. And actually, the data that I submitted is in the query string now, because that, too, is the default behavior when you submit a form. It submits as a GET request to the current URL, which is nice default behavior if you're making an app that is like a survey or something, and you just want to have a single CGI script on your web server because it's 1997. But it's not 1997. And what we actually want to do is capture, when I click submit, trying this again, I want to capture the data from this form and send it to the server. And then maybe refetch the comments. Actually, we're not listing all of the comments yet, so we'll probably have to add that as well. So in order to do that, I can, you've installed event listeners at this point on buttons and stuff, right? Yeah, so forms have an event that you can hook on, and it is called onSubmit. And on submit, we can say this.addComment, which is going to be a method in our class, which I'm realizing, what's that? Here, let's make an anonymous function right now, and we can sort of discuss. Oh, well, this is going to get a value passed to it. It's going to get an event. Okay, we'll do it this way. Not a page transition event. And let's try logging that event. Okay, so hi. Okay, so we're getting that event, and then I don't know if you saw that. There was a brief flicker where we saw the event. If I were to say, please retain the, don't clear the console on navigation. Where is that? Preserve log upon navigation. Then we will actually get to see hello world. So the page reloads, but we got this kind of weird looking event structure, and it, and I can't expand it because that version of the page is dead now because we navigated away. This is what events look like in React. React sort of has its own event system that sits on top of the browser's event system. It's very, very, very similar, but not exactly the same. And the way in which it's not the same is that it's sort of designed to be the least common denominator and smooth out differences between browsers. So basically, once you are handling a React event, which is the kind of thing you get from onSubmit, you don't have to worry as much about like, oh, does this, like, is this feature supported or is that feature supported on the event itself. Okay, so this is great. We want to prevent this navigation from happening, and the way we can do that is by saying prevent default. This is a web API, or this is like part of the web event spec that says whatever, dear browser, whatever you were going to do with this event, don't do it. Like in particular, if you were about to navigate the page because of this event, it shouldn't do that. I'm going to handle it myself. So now if I do like my test data quickly goes from being like very nice to being random matching on the keyboard. Okay, so now notice like I'm not navigating the page. We stopped that, and now we can expand out this sort of fake proxy event and see all of these crazy properties it has on it. So these are the properties that are all available on a DOM event, on like a event from the web browser. And without like digging into them too deeply, the one we're interested in right now is target, which will be the form that this occurred on. So if I do event.target, I should see something like a form element. Yep, here's this. And then if I ask for event.target.name.value and event.target. Sorry, it's username value. And event.target. What did I call this? Text value. I think. I'm going to get the data I typed into my form. So this is enough for us to go make an AJAX request, I think, right? Yeah.
So basically, we should be knowing which, I mean, first we are using username because it is a type of input, and second we are using text type of input. That's when we are capturing text using target. By
Yeah.
using username and text.
Oh, sorry, because these are the names of these inputs. Oh, sorry, name, username, name, text, and forms have, yeah, sorry, if we just printed what these are, I skipped a step. So on the form, and we can actually be more specific about this, form, yeah, so it'll be form.username and form.text. Forms pick up their child inputs by name. So you can say like form. If I called this blorg, form.blorg. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so the target property of an event is the element that that event happened on.
So it doesn't have to be a form, it could be like anything.
Yeah, you have event.target on click events or mouse move events or anything.
So if we are not passing name to our particular input or particular information like that, we can directly get target on one hand. And if we are not passing a name to our input and next or something.
If you don't give it a name, it's a lot harder to get at. So like, how do I get the value of this? We could try, I think form.value is not a thing, though. Maybe it is. Undefined. We could probably have like an on key down console log. Let's do yeah, so you can like you could get the data out of this somehow, but if you're and we'll actually see a way to sort of more tightly control what is in these form fields. But if you're doing this kind of like lightweight, uncontrolled, you just have an onSubmit handler way of getting data out of forms, then they really need to have names. Otherwise, they're quite challenging to get to. But with names, they're quite easy to use. So this is username again. And so now with this, I can go and make an AJAX request. So I can say like, text equals form.text value, and then Axios dot, what did I do? Post to where do I post this to? Where am I? Who am I? What do I want? Okay, so I have the name here. It's part of, I'm pulling it from props match params. Okay, so let's actually make a getter for this so I don't have to replicate this logic all over the place. I'll say get emoji name and return, oh. Oh, I can see this. So have you seen getters before? You have, I guess, in Sequelize. You can do them in classes too, by just saying get and then the method name. And that means that you don't have to invoke it when you call it. So this, just mentioning it basically will cause this function to be called, and whatever it returns will be this value. Cool trick, right? So that means I can pretty easily post to API emoji this.emoji name / comment. Comments? Yes, comments plural. So if I post to that, Axios wants data as the second argument, which should be name and text. And then I guess I should do something when this succeeds. I can be like, then console log. What we'll probably want to do here is like reload the comments panel or something, but we don't have a comments panel yet. So that's the problem. Okay, actually, this is my favorite emoji. Failed. Axios is not defined. Oh. I'm importing just the functions I wanted. That's nice. Okay. Cannot read property emoji name if undefined. Oh, right. I knew this would be a problem at some point. Okay, so let's interpret this together. I got this error. I can't read the property emoji name of undefined on line 22. So what is it telling me? On this, right?
Yeah.
So what is it telling you that this is? Yeah, because what did we do? We passed in this dot add comment, but this is not bound at all. So there's a couple of ways of binding it. We can add a constructor and then call bind in it. We can also do this, which is a syntax for initializing properties of a class, which, because this is an arrow function, will give us something that's already bound. Maybe. Okay, so that worked. We could also have done this. I prefer this for kind of obvious reasons. It's like much shorter, I think. So we can do them here, or use class properties. And the way this works is this. Whenever JavaScript sees like something equals something else inside of a class definition, it's as though you ran this code inside the constructor, basically, and had like this dot appended to it. So the reason this is coming in pre-bound is that we are defining it within the scope of this class, and it's an arrow function, which always retains a binding to this. Okay, questions about that? Or anything we just did? All right, do we want to see if this worked? I'm curious. API emoji, what is the name of this emoji, actually? Hard eyes. Hard eyes. Comments, please be there, please be there. Yes. Oh my god. Okay, great. So if I look at the API endpoint for this emoji, now I've got a comment on it. And if I go and look at user ID 1, actually, I'm not sure I can do this. I think I don't have that endpoint, which actually might be a problem. Let's see, I can get all these comments, and I can... So these comments should actually include the username, I think, which I think I can do by saying, like, include all true. Oh, great. So now I've got my username here. And also the emoji, which is going to be pretty excessive. How about just including the user? Okay, there. So there I am. And this will be useful because I'm going to want to print the username with all of the comments. Any questions before we go and do that? Okay, let's create a component to map over, to like go and fetch this endpoint and then map over them to render all of the comments. So there is a comment here. We cannot yet see it. If we go and add them, I guess the thing that would make the most sense is to put all of this into, like I'm thinking on component did mount, we could go and also fetch the comments and all that, which is exactly the thing I complained about in Juke, was having a bunch of Axios requests and a bunch of state on this component. So let's actually just create another component, comments extends React component. And this component is going to, first of all, render the form. And then here we should pass in, okay, we should render this component for, oh, sorry, not component, comments for the emoji name, sure, will be this dot emoji name. And add comment gets moved down. Okay, so at this point, everything I think should still work. Let's see. Oh no, this is saying this dot emoji name, which means we still need a getter here, which is just going to say return this dot props dot emoji name, which maybe means I should just use this dot props here, right? No need to have more layers of complexity than we need. It also means that we can, ultimately we're going to be able to do something a little better here in that we can like refresh the comments after we've posted. For now, let's get the comments refreshed to begin with by saying that in our component did mount, we're going to basically do this thing all over again. So we'll get props.emoji name, and then, slash comments. And then we're going to say that the comments are the response data. And now we should be able to say, okay, here's a div. Render a list of comments. That's going to be, let's get the comments out of the state. State. Oh. Return loading. And then we'll map over them. So map each comment to, what does a comment look like? It has .user.name, I think. And text. Okay. Will that work? It would be kind of a miracle, wouldn't it? Oh, wow. It's kind of a miracle. Oh, sorry. Key is c.id. Each child should have a unique key prop. Didn't I just? Oh, I did. I just included it. Yeah. Cool. And then if header, I hate this. Okay, so submitting doesn't cause it to show up immediately. I have to reload. And a quick way to fix that would be to have, I basically want to do this request again. Probably I should put this into another function other than component did mount, but I also could just be like, then once you're done, this dot component did mount. If I didn't call that, yeah, it would probably reload and kind of work out, but this will actually be a bit better, I think, because this will cause it to replace the state on the page without reloading the whole thing. Okay. And then I should probably do something to more sensibly erase this. Like maybe maybe here be like name.value, text.value. No, what did I do? Cannot create. Oh, I see. Forum.username value. Okay, so questions about that flow. We basically took, so thing one was we contained our knowledge of comments into this comments component, which will definitely be moving to another file. It's just nice to have it here for now. And then in this comments component, we do sort of the same song and dance as before in terms of getting the data we want and putting it on state. But then we now have this this listener that can send data back up and eventually like have it go all the way up to the server, after which we call refresh, in this case component did mount, and like get new data to see the thing we just posted. We could probably eliminate this because we have, like we basically have all the important information, so we could like add something to state based on what we have here. But this is fine, I think, and it means that we will only actually see our comment posted when it does actually hit the server and come back to us. Okay, so questions on that or anything you'd like to see me go over again? I'm happy to do so. Okay, there's one more thing we should talk about, which is that this is not, the way we're plucking data off of the form is fine for very simple forms, but it is not the most recommended way of getting data off forms in React because it makes validations kind of hard. So by this I mean, let's see, say we wanted to enforce you entering a username, and we wanted, or like a username of at least a few characters. And we wanted to enforce that as you're typing it so that you like know before hitting submit that we're going to require you to do this. There's no great way to do that in this system because what we really want to do is attach a listener to input. So we want to be like on change this dot username changed, or maybe on username change. And as soon as we do this, I think React is going to complain. Actually, no, it's not. Let's approach this differently. Let's say I want to remember what my username is and fill it out by default. That's kind of sensible, right? So to do that, I might store the username somewhere. Like, for example, at this point, I might... Have you seen local storage before? We used it in a workshop, right? So there's a thing in the browser, it's called local storage. If you say local storage.foo equals 10, you can reload the page as many times as you want, and this data will still be there. Notice that it turns everything into a string. But it's like a really cheap way to store some data locally on the page. Quite nice, actually. So we can do that here to sort of remember my username. So whenever I submit this form, I can say local storage.username equals name. And then presumably here, I would want to say that the value of this is local storage.username. And now when I do this, React is going to mildly freak out. No, it's not going to freak out at all. Why is that? Oh, I think I know why. Okay, so let's say I'm Ashi, and it's like, hello there. Okay, so now React freaks out, thank God. And it's saying that a component is changing the uncontrolled input of type undefined to be controlled. What that means is I have now set a value for this input to be, but there is no, I do not have an onChange event listener for this value. So React can't tell me when changes happen to this, which means now I can't type anything at all. Basically, React detects the fact that you are trying to set the value of this, but you are not listening to any input events on it, which means that there is no sensible way for you to know what for this component to react to user input other than to just not do it at all. So if we want to set the value of an input, we need to listen to changes to it and store those on our state in order to send them back. So let's see what that looks like. We'll say onChange is this.username.change. And then we will write that function. It's going to be an event listener, and I think we'll have event.target.value, because event.target will be this input. So we can get the username from that. Let's print it to make sure. And at that point, actually, we can store the new username. Oh, wait, no, I'm still not doing it right. Because this is... right. So now the problem is that this value is not changing because I'm not updating the state of this. I'm not updating the state of this component when the username changes. So I actually have to do this through the component state. Meaning, when is a good time to put this on there? Presumably in componented mount. So in componented mount, I can, much like I fetch the comments from here, I can fetch the the username from local storage and say this.set_state username is local storage.username. And whenever it changes, I'm going to set it on local storage and set it on the component state. And now it's just another part of state that needs to get loaded here. So the moral of this story is, if you want to interact with the value of a form field as it's changing, you need to you need to wire it through your events, your component's internal state. Cannot read copy map undefined. Oh, didn't. Comments, is this comments or integer? Okay, so now I can enter like a full name. And if I look here, it's printing every step of the way. So the distinction, so we now have two different kinds of form inputs in this form. We have an uncontrolled text area. You can tell it's uncontrolled because we are not specifying the value and it does not have an on-change listener. And we have a controlled username input, for which we are specifying the value explicitly, and we have specified an on-change listener. And this listener, which is up here, stores the username and sets the new username on state. In this case, we're accepting whatever the user types, but we don't have to do that. For example, we could allow only numbers if we wanted not a username but a phone number, for example. So it could be like, if username dot match okay, so if it doesn't match one or more digits, say 0 or more digits, then we will return. And this is going to be a problem because the currently stored username is bad. So I'll just get rid of it. So now you can't really see what's going on. Oh, wait, it didn't work. Why? Start a string, end a string. Okay, great. Okay, so now if I, really? Okay, yeah, there we go. So the problem there was that username was not being set by default, and so React thought we were trying to change from being an uncontrolled input to being a controlled one again. Okay, so now with this check in here, if I try and type like any letters, you can't really see what I'm typing, but I'm trying to type letters and nothing is happening. But the moment I try and type numbers, it works. So sometimes you will see form fields on websites that like only let you enter something that like looks like a credit card number, or something that like matches a certain pattern. this is how you implement that with React. It works like pretty darn well, but not perfectly. As you might imagine, there's ways you can break it. Like, I might have just discovered one. No. It's actually quite a bit of work for React to figure out like where you're inserting characters and keep the cursor in the right place, even as the text goes through all of this nonsense. But it mostly works. I see sad faces. Or possibly just blown minds. This is a lot of stuff. Yeah, I actually don't particularly like, so the reason we're covering controlled inputs at all is this workshop uses them. I'm rather partial to not having controlled inputs unless you absolutely need to. Because I find this flow to be a much more straightforward. Like, add an onSubmit handler, and then construct a post request in the onSubmit. And that's the first thing you'll be doing. And for like 90% of cases, that's all you need to do. In the case where you need to do sort of more intricate validation, this is how you do it. But I would not start there when you're designing anything now or approaching this workshop. I don't know if that helps very much. Okay. We actually have 15 more minutes before the workshop is set to start, which is great because you can chill for that time or finish watching the review for the last one if you would like. Other than that, I've sent out pairs, and I will post this code and also slides for this workshop. Any questions before that have actually coagulated into questions rather than generalized confusion and anxiety? Okay, best of luck. I will be floating around during this workshop, possibly with tissues. Helping with coagulation, yes. Oh, did I not?